Here we are at session number 4, motions that change meetings. These are a different type of motions, and it's important that we get to become familiar with them. So let's get right to it, shall we? Now, before we go on, we should talk about the fact that in parliamentary process, there are many ways in which votes can be done. The most common being show of hands. Usually the presiding officer can sort out who has been voting for and against and whether or not there's a clear majority. But sometimes you need to do more than that. Let's say it's a motion involving 2/3 ratification, then you may have to do a roll call, call on individual members to rise and give their vote. There may be a response by voice that clearly designates that there's a majority, so by general consent, a voting process can be initiated. And sometimes in this case, we have to use a specific form of incidental motion to divide the membership, the group, into portions where it's easier to calculate and tabulate the votes that they have done. Sometimes issues are controversial and people would vote one way if it's in public and maybe a different way if it's confidential. And so as a result, there's nothing wrong with adopting voting by written ballot. The written ballot with its little voting forms, and they're collected, and the way someone votes is kept confidential. Now, in incidental and privileged motions, there are some interesting tools. Some agendas have time slots assigned to items on the agenda. If the agenda is adopted, and we'll talk about that in a future session, then each item must be dealt with within the time frame allotted that has been approved by the group. And sometimes there will be an issue that takes more time than it was planned for, and that leads to a circumstance where a member has the right to rise, be recognized by the chair, and call orders of the day, which means wherever we are, the chairman has no choice but to go immediately to where on the agenda we're supposed to be in terms of the time allotted. So that can really impact the meeting, no question about it. Question of privilege. Now, I've seen this done in unique circumstances, and it is a order of precedence that's quite high. It's 4th. And as a result of that, it's a tactical tool that can be used. Now, the idea of a question of privilege is that you're stopping the meeting. Maybe there's been an electrical failure. That's the idea of it. But I've seen it used in other circumstances, and it's very powerful because there's no seconder, it's not amendable, it's not debatable, and no vote is taken. So it's of high precedence, and yet it has a specific and unique place, room's too cold, these kinds of things. But I've seen it used in other ways, and it really comes down to the chair and how they accept that. Take a recess means you stop the meeting temporarily. It's number 3 in precedence. It requires a seconder. It is amendable. It's debatable, and 51% approval. And a great tactical tool I like is motion to adjourn or fix a time to adjourn. And notice it's order of precedence number 2 and number 1. Wow, that's significant. Requires a seconder, is not amendable, not debatable, and it has 51% approval. So if you're a clever chairperson, you might want to have the time for the adjournment built into the agenda. And regardless of where the meeting is, when the time comes, the meeting is adjourned, which means it's over. So if you have a controversial topic and you put it at the end of your agenda, it's possible that that issue will die on what they call the order paper because the meeting was adjourned. in the middle of the debate. So a very interesting tactical tool, and I've seen it used to great effect. And look at that, it trumps question of privilege. So when you're using tactics, which sometimes is very appropriate, these are great tools to consider. So those are privileged motions. Now we have a new group called incidental, which are really just as useful. A point of order. Now, sometimes you, as a member of the floor, see that, well, the chairperson's taking a few liberties, but it's not really anything wrong, but it's not quite correct, and maybe they don't know, and you don't want to disrupt the meeting, but maybe you want to nudge it. So you look to be recognized and you rise. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe that motion was seconded. Or another great point of order is, Mr. Chairman, have we established quorum today? I'm not certain that we have quorum. Do we have quorum, Mr. Chairman? Point of order. So what you're doing is drawing attention to rules and reminding the chair they should proceed to follow the rules. Point of information. Now, sometimes there's a debate going on. You really are not for or against the debate, but you know something that's relevant and germane to the discussion. So you raise your hand, you're recognized by the chair, you rise in a point of information. I understand that the motion is to increase dues by 10%. Just a point of information. Last year we had a record surplus. And you sit down. You just provided information relevant to the discussion, but you're not taking sides. You haven't voted yet. You're not even debating the issue. You just want to provide information that's germane to the discussion. Suspension of rules. Sometimes some informal discussion will cover a lot of ground very, very quickly. And so it's at times appropriate to suspend the rules if there's a real need for rapid discussion. No one's really for or against it, but there just needs to be an advancement of the issues. So that's what it's meant for. Division of question. Well, I mentioned that earlier, that when you have a large number of people on a vote and the vote seems very close, you want to divide the assembly so that's much more manageable and much easier to tabulate the results. Consideration by paragraph. And this is a very interesting one. I have some very germane first-hand experience with that, using this tool. And essentially, two organizations were merging into one, and they were trying to adopt a set of bylaws common to the two. And there's a lot of material in there: new head office, new bank account, and of course, the great issue, they had to deal with raising fees. And so I suggested three choices to the chair, and the chair adopted this approach. Either, we're doing it paragraph by paragraph. Paragraph one, are you for it? Are you against it? You want to refer it to the bylaw committee. Three choices. And he would call for a vote of each of the three choices. And it worked with spectacular success. We adopted the bylaws, 2/3 approval for 80% of the bylaws. And the 20% that didn't get approved got referred to committee, and they all had to do with the membership dues, which 1 year later got all sorted out because there was time to discuss it. And so they lived with the existing old rates for different members for 1 year, frozen while there were, the bylaws committee sorted all that out. Just the next year it worked like a charm, all resolved, full constitution adopted. So I found it to be a very effective tool. Object to consideration. Now, this is a tough one. Tactical tool. You can interfere with a motion, but you have to jump in before the motion is seconded. And so someone makes a motion, we want to increase dues by 10%. You jump in before the seconder is made. I object to consideration of the motion. So there's no seconder, it's not amendable, there's no debate. 2/3 approval is required, and it stops it. It's an interesting tool if you're going to use it. Of course, motion to reconsider anything that was done in the previous meeting. Let's reconsider it. And basically, it takes that motion back to the debate stage. Motion to rescind kills it. Whatever the issue is, maybe last week we agreed to increase dues by 10%, but this week, motion to rescind, and it stopped. And so that's the idea of this type of motion. Seconder is required, not amendable, it's debatable, and 51% needs to approve. One final topic I want to quickly talk about is minutes. And I've looked at lots of minutes for lots of organizations, most specifically minutes that you find in minute books of corporations, which are prepared by legal counsel. And my observations are they're very, very simple documents. They have the day of the meeting, the time in which the meeting is called to order, the identification when that quorum was constituted, who is the recording secretary. And you can throw in some brief narratives of discussions. That's optional, not recommended, but you can do it. But you must put in a record of all motions transacted, whether passed or failed, who made the motion, who seconded the motion, and was it accepted or failed. Some people like to put in how many votes for and against. That's not required. Did it pass? Did it fail? That's it. And the time of the adjournment. Final topic for minutes is that when you start a meeting, it's good to review the minutes of the previous meeting, gets everyone in sync with what's going on. I strongly recommend that you circulate the minutes beforehand. That gives the chair the opportunity, can we approve the minutes? And they can't make the motion, but they can certainly lobby for it. And that's something we'll talk in future sessions, the ability of the chair to lobby. They can lobby. I'd like to ask for a motion that we accept the minutes as circulated. That's made. There's a seconder. We can go straight to a vote, and it's dealt with. We don't burn 20 minutes of the meeting reading last meeting's minutes, because if you circulate it and everyone's a chance to read them, there really is no need to read them out loud. So that's just food for thought. Food for thought. So for today's session, I thank you for joining me here today. We talked about privileged and incidental motions. If you enjoyed this material as well as the material of the previous sessions, I'd appreciate you if you click the like button. If you want to be updated, and there's a lot more material coming, trust me, about parliamentary process. If you want to be updated about when that material arrives so that you can digest it session by session, feel free to subscribe to this channel. Click the notifications bell to make sure that you're notified when a new piece is added to the inventory. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section. I appreciate your comments, and I'll be more than happy to incorporate questions into future sessions. So with that, happy gaveling, and look to see you at the next session.